if Russia were to do something like that, they're looking for disruption, but what they're really looking for is impact and propaganda. Ireland's vulnerability, which has already been talked about, becomes front page news all around the world.
Maybe we've just been living in a
The
bubble.
Yantar is a fascinating ship. It's often been in the Irish Sea.
You're listening to The Big Tech Show with Adrian Weckler, sponsored by Deal. Deal lets you hire, manage, pay, and equip anyone, anywhere. Visit DEEL.com/bigtech.
Hello and you're welcome to The Big Tech Show with me, Adrian Weckler. Now, Ireland has been a sitting duck for crucial international cables to be cut and has nothing like the defences needed to protect them. That's a claim we've often heard, but the latest iteration of it comes from Vodafone and the Irish Institute of Economic Affairs, who are saying that it's reached a critical stage because 75% of all transatlantic data cables pass through or near Ireland. They're saying it's time to do something about this. Fergal O'Connor from the Irish and Sunday Independent has been reporting on it. Fergal, before we get to what they're looking for, let's look at the deficit that they're talking about first. They say that the impact of a sabotage incident by Russia or others, and they're quite specific about that, could have a major impact on economic activity and on society, as well as for Ireland's credibility. To give some flavours to what they're talking about there, remind us about the Russian Yantar.
The Yantar is a fascinating ship. I checked earlier, it's currently in the Baltic, but it's often been in the Irish Sea. It spends time passing through along our coast, the Irish Sea, the Atlantic. It's a research vessel. We in Ireland have the Granuaile, also a research vessel. But European governments suspect that it's way more than just mapping the seabed for geological things. They suspect that it's actually has capabilities around, and in fact, they know that it has capabilities around subsea cables. It can launch submersibles. It can, it can hover over these cables and it can interact with them, and presumably it can cut the cables if they wanted to do that. And the fact is that they have shown a propensity to do that type of thing in Irish waters at different times, where they've hovered over gas pipelines between Ireland and the UK. They'll often leave their shipping transponders on, and people read that as nearly like a message to presumably the UK government and maybe the Irish government too. Look what we can do. Look what we're capable of. It's when it shows up around here, it's tracked by the Royal Navy, and there have been a few close calls where it uses lasers to push off reconnaissance by the Royal Navy and stuff like that. What this report
just can I ask you just about that? When they do turn up in Irish waters, what do we do about it, or what happens?
Well, what happens is the ship is shadowed by the Royal Navy in the first instance, but there's communication between the Royal Navy and the Irish authorities. So Ireland will send out a patrol vessel, maybe the James Joyce or whatever. It will keep an eye. That's because the Yantar isn't necessarily doing anything wrong. It's just the fear around its capabilities and what it could potentially do, because it's in international waters. It never comes within 12 miles of the coast or anything like that.
I remember I think it was 2022, when there were Russian ships apparently off the coast of Cork doing war games exercises, and there was this famous TV footage that went viral of fishing boats.
Absolutely, yeah.
That went out.
Yeah.
But that was our military response in Ireland, was to send out a few trawlers.
Well, it was certainly the response of the fishermen who didn't like these big Russian vessels in their fishing grounds. And the problem that has been highlighted widely, but specifically in this report, is that Ireland lacks the capability to do extensive reconnaissance or any type of defensive capability. So we have two patrol at any one time. We've more than two patrol vessels, but at any one time, up until recently at least, the Irish Navy could only put out two patrol vessels for personnel reasons. So
let's just look at that for a second. I wrote a piece a few weeks ago in the Sunday Independent, taking Micheál Martin up on his promise that cybersecurity and security would be at the heart of the Irish presidency of the European Union. But to your point about what we actually have, you look at our military capability here in Ireland. This is not to advocate one way or the other. So we've 8 naval patrol vessels, I think, and I think 4 are available at any one time, but we only operate 2.
For personnel reasons.
For personnel reasons. Yeah. So staffing. So we can't commit to actually staff our patrol boats. We have 7 transportation or patrolling aircraft. We have 10 helicopters. We have a few more in order, in fairness. And then you have some of the other details. We have 80 armored personnel carriers. Some of our light tactical armored vehicles, they kept breaking down, and they were so bad that when we offered them free to Ukraine, they turned them down.
Yeah.
So we're not really, we don't have meaningful defense systems when we talk about things like Russian ships off the coast and potentially cutting cables.
Now, what we do, in fairness, that's all true, but what would have to be said in fairness to the government, what we do have is an ambition to improve that. So, for example, one of the first things that's been done in terms of military spending is radar and sonar, which is badly needed and which will cost taxpayers money, but it'll be put in place over the short term. The report, though, talks about that and welcomes it, but it says this is sensing technology, not defensive technology. Yeah. So, in other words, with those sort of capabilities, you will know exactly what a ship like the Yantar is doing, but you won't necessarily be able to stop it.
Yeah.
And the report is certainly hinting strongly that we need to go further than that, and we need to because the other thing is we're under pressure in terms of our military spending, and people point the finger at us as kind of an open back door to Europe. But in the UK, they're also under pressure in terms of the Royal Navy. They have difficulties around patrolling their waters. They don't, they're stretched when you look at what's going on around the world and what they're involved in. So that's actually a live political issue where Nigel Farage wants the Royal Navy to get involved with the boating, the boats in the Channel, and people are saying, well, we don't actually have the capability. So our big brother in military terms, the UK, we've always kind of relied on them for our protection. They have their own problems.
Yeah. And I'm conscious of, let's say a cable was actually cut or interfered with substantially. I presume we would probably be effectively relying on Britain or the US or even NATO to intervene there.
I would imagine so. I don't think we'd have the capability, and it's the wider impacts of that kind of incident that this report really points to. So that would be very problematic for Ireland, for our economy. There's a vulnerability there around, our banking system and the data centers that we host. But this report highlights that actually the vulnerabilities in Irish waters have a Europe-wide implication.
I wonder how many cables would have to be cut before we would actually notice a difference to some of those services you were talking about. I think, how many cables do we have? I saw the figure 14 mentioned.
I'm not sure the number of cables. In terms of percentage, you mentioned the percentage already. It's 75% of this big subsea cables pass through Ireland or through Irish waters. But
I'm just wondering myself as well. I've been to a lot of data centers and I've talked to a lot of big companies about this. And if one or say 2 of those cables were cut, what would we notice the next day or that very day?
Well, when you think about how digital infrastructure has become so central to our lives, if the number is 14, 1 out of 14, maybe everything doesn't go down, but there's a randomness in that then, isn't there? There's,
Yeah,
does the bank go down? Does our ability to provide data into hospitals or whatever it is? Uh, Also, I think in reality, if Russia were to do something like that, they're looking for disruption, but what they're really looking for is impact and propaganda. And Ireland, the next day impact of that could be, the banks go down, it could be a big hit to the economy. But the longer term impact of that would be a big hit to our credibility, because immediately that becomes a massive news story, and Ireland's vulnerability, which has already been talked about, becomes front page news all around the world.
We'd love to hear your thoughts on your overall listening experience. It only takes a minute, and your feedback helps us improve what we do. When you take part, you'll also be in with a chance to win a €500 One for All voucher. Visit mypodcastfeedback.com and enter your code TECH, that's TECH. Thank you for helping us shape the future of what we do.
Yeah, I wondered what credibility we have. Maybe we have just been sheltered by nobody really talking about it, on a headline news level. But I mean, if something like that were to happen, do you think we would have the appetite here to actually do anything about it? It's a lot of calls from a lot of different sectors to increase our defence spending here. And I'm conscious that the Irish Institute of Economic Affairs, which is the main mover behind this report, it has a very definite view on that. It's not clear that that's consistent with the view, among Irish society, though. But maybe we've just been living in a bubble.
I suppose in Western Europe, we've all been living in a bubble since the end of World War II. And that bubble maybe is a big American bubble with its little brother Britain. So we've lived in a very safe part of the world. But what has happened since the invasion of Ukraine by Russia is that the bubble has, if not been completely burst, it's been, penetrated. You just look what happened earlier this week, and I don't know who was responsible for this, but drones hit a DHL aircraft in Germany. But if you were to pick the next country that it was most likely to be, it would probably be an Irish aircraft, given the number of Irish-owned aircraft that are leased out to airlines like DHL.
Yeah, we've an extraordinary, Irish leasing companies have an extraordinarily high percentage of the world's aircraft leased out to airlines.
Way over 50% of them are Irish.
Which a lot of people don't know that.
Yeah, so we have a massive fleet of aircraft flying all over the world. So, and the point of that in relation to this is that the threats that are out there now in the world do impact Ireland in a way that they never did before. And because we lived in a bubble because we lived in a less complex society before, a less developed economy, but we've just moved up in terms of our importance.
Just on that aircraft thing, you and I were talking some time back about an interview you had done with somebody in relation to the demise of Spirit Airlines.
Spirit, yeah.
And I think you told me at the time, the guy you were talking about, his team or an adjacent team, they were responsible for physically going and getting whatever it was, 70, 150 aircraft, different parts of America.
170 Spirit Airbus
because
aircraft.
They were owned by an Irish leasing firm.
Not all of them. Many of them were owned by numerous Irish leasing firms.
And so his job was what?
He's Matthew G from 6 West Aviation in Shannon. Very small company, but with a big big impact. They they ferry aircraft. So on a day-to-day basis, they might be hired in to take aircraft for maintenance or whatever. But if an airline goes bust and the airline's aircraft, as happened with Spirit, find themselves at airports all over the place. In terms of, with Spirit, there was 170 odd aircraft around the US parked up with their parent company gone bust. The Irish leasing companies were in a bit of a panic.
Where's our plane?
Where's our plane?
What did he have to do?
He had to organise to get pilots in, to get to deal with the FAA, to get the
go and get the planes, and bring them to one spot in Arizona.
A few of them have ended up here actually, but
where airplanes go to die often.
Well, where airplanes, they go to die. In terms of the Spirit aircraft, some of them will go on. And
aren't there some of the world's biggest airplane graveyards in Arizona?
Yeah, two of them. And the Spirit fleet are there. Some of them will go on to other airlines, and some of them will be broken up for parts.
I found that very interesting, and sorry for diverting you from your main story, but just to come back to this cable cutting report from Vodafone and the IIEA, one of the things they're calling for is this idea of a tax credit. Now, I mean, obviously they say that Ireland should do more in defence. I'm wondering how much of a self-interest there is for a company like Vodafone, a telecoms company, what this tax credit they're calling for is, and how much of it might suit some of their other purposes.
Yeah, so maybe take the tax credit first. They're calling it a resilience tax credit. So
great word, resilience.
Yeah. In other words, if they have vulnerable technology, vulnerable subsea cable, any other technology that they build, it's all expensive technology. If they need to spend money on protecting that or making it more secure, they're saying there should be a tax credit on the model of the R&D tax credit that companies can get.
Even if there's no R&D involved in it.
It wouldn't be R&D, but it'd be
the fact that it's risky.
It's like to protect a cable or...
And are they saying in exchange for that they would buy gunboats themselves and fight off the Yantar?
No, I don't think so.
Okay.
No, I don't think they'll do that.
So what would they be doing in exchange for this tax credit?
So a good example, and it's not in terms of anything to do with Russia. Last January, you remember Storm Eowyn, a lot of the networks went down in the West in particular. So people were like quite a long time without their mobile phone. That caused massive problems for ordinary people, for business, for everything. Vodafone are actually in the middle of implementing a space-based system, a little bit like Elon Musk's Starlink, but a bit different in that your mobile, my mobile, will be able, if you're a Vodafone subscriber from next year, if another storm came along, knocked out the networks, it will connect to satellites that are being launched at the moment.
So they call this resilience. I remember covering this story at the time, and I remember asking Vodafone who actually will use this. They were a little fuzzy on the details. They mentioned storms, like once in a generation storms for like maybe a week. And I asked them, well, would I ever use it going down the country? And they said, well, you might in areas. And then the next question I had, I thought Vodafone had 99% phone coverage of the country. Yes, we do. So it would be for the 1% of spots, like up the top of a mountain. Well, no, it's not as simple as that.
Yeah, and I think what they'll say to you is it's if a major storm knocks everything out for the day or the week or whatever it is, that your Vodafone signal isn't available through the normal network, you will actually be getting probably a reduced network, but you'll be getting it from satellites.
And how does that connect to their call on the Irish government to reduce their tax bill?
So obviously developing something like that, and I don't know, just to be clear, I don't know that they're linking the tax credit to that particular project, but it could be a project like that where there's a resilience side to it. And you can see where there's a resilient side to what they're doing there with the space technology. And then they get a tax credit from the Irish government for developing that type of resilience technology.
Do you know, it's a real irony here, and we could spend a bit of time on this. We don't, unfortunately, but what they're arguing is that they're an essential utility, which is crucial for society to keep going. But usually, when they're talking to the telecoms regulator, they argue that only air is an essential utility that is crucial for the society to keep going, and they shouldn't be regulated like an essential utility. So it's kind of interesting, the two sides of the same coin there.
Yeah, and some of the other recommendations in the report do, it touches on some of those debates within the telecom sector. So one of the recommendations is that the government give companies like Vodafone in that sector greater long-term certainty on the spectrum. So as a country, we own a spectrum on which you can put all forms of communication.
We auction that spectrum, or we allocate it under special circumstances.
Yeah. And what Vodafone would like is to be given their place on that spectrum in perpetuity, so that what they will argue is that allows them to develop the resilient technology because they aren't worrying that in 10 years' time a government comes along and gives that piece of the spectrum to someone else.
Give us 1,000 acres of land, so that gives us an incentive to do something on that land.
Yeah.
I remember traveling in a very remote part of Kansas, and the town was so desperate that it had signs on the outside of it saying, "Free land if you will just live here and build here. Some villages in Italy will pay you to go there." It's an interesting argument that they're making. That it gives them an incentive. A lot of telecoms companies obviously argue this a lot of the time, and they argue the sky's about to fall on them. And they've been doing that for the last 10, 20, 30 years.
Yeah. There's an interesting piece in today's FT about the CEO of T-Mobile talking about Elon Musk, who said earlier in the week that he was going to launch a Starlink mobile phone service. And he's coming out and he's saying, the threat to our T-Mobile being a US, one of the big US versions of Vodafone. And he's saying there's no threat to, the threat to our business is greatly exaggerated by people around any new Elon Musk-backed mobile phone service. Interesting that Vodafone are also now they're not talking about Elon Musk at all, or that has never been mentioned. But it is interesting that all of these things are being talked about at the same time.
Well, the telecoms companies, in my experience, I don't know about yours, but like every year or two, there's a potential crisis that could destroy the entire universe. They used to be, I think for a long time, they were calling for a tax or a levy on Netflix and those online services, because it was their pipes being used for broadband. I mean, there was an unbelievably cheeky request. Most governments just told them to go where the sun doesn't shine. The interesting one about Starlink, you mentioned, I don't know what you think about it, but I can't see a Starlink mobile phone service other than for people who are in the type of places where the Vodafone satellite service might work, top of a mountain or nowhere where anybody lives, working, because the vast majority of places are fairly well covered at the moment by mobile cellular activity. And the thing about where most of us live, which is in city and urban, suburban areas, the issue isn't coverage or speed. The issue is the density of buildings, of trying to get through steel and concrete. And so it's not as simple as just pointing your phone up at the sky. Anyway, that's probably a subject for a different podcast episode. But Fergal Connor, thanks so much for coming on and explaining all that to us. Really appreciate it. John Smith was on sound today, and JJ Clark produced this episode. I'm Adrian Weckler, and you've been listening to or watching The Big Tech Show, and we'll talk to you soon.